McMullen Jody McDonald here with you on Birds 365. We were hoping this Friday, when you looked at it in the calendar, would be one for us where we'd be still talking Eagles football, that they had made it to the postseason, that we got another week of Eagles football to talk about. Well, it's better than that. We have 2 more weeks of Eagles football to talk about because they're not playing this week. They got to bye. They will host any playoff game they played this year in the NFC, right up until having to get on a big old jet plane and go to Arizona for the Super Bowl if they can win 2 more games. It's worked out quite well for the Eagles. But they got to finish the deal now, Johnny Mac. Before the season started, the last week before the preseason ended, I jumped up to a 12-win season for the Eagles. You and I were both at 11. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go one better. I'm going to get to 12. They won 14 games. 14. Yeah. I did not see that.
And probably would have won more, let's be honest. Jalen Hurts didn't get hurt. Yeah, it's been quite the ride. That's why I tell people all the time, enjoy it, because don't get used to it. Stuff like this doesn't happen every season in the NFL. And I think a lot of people haven't, for whatever reason, wrap their head around how good this team was during the regular season. Not just the quarterback, but, top 5 offense, top 5 defense, all the sacks, all the turnovers. It's been a really, really good football team. And hopefully they get healthy enough to finish that job, because I think health is the biggest question mark moving forward. The Super Bowl, the potential Super Bowl, that's going to be a tough game against anybody who makes it through that gauntlet. The NFC, man, that's another part of this storybook season. You couldn't ask for anything easier on paper. Getting through the playoffs are always difficult, so that going in, it's the best teams, right? So you're going to be playing some good teams, but typically you have a lot bigger hurdles than what you see on paper right now in the NFC. That's why there's a there's always a sense of urgency to take advantage of a season like this. But because of all these outlying factors, and then throw in the coaching staff as well, and the fact that Shane Steichen may or may not be here, Jonathan Gannon may or may not be here, Brian Johnson may or may not be here. This is, Nick Sirianni talks about it all the time in average seasons. This is the only time this group will be together as a group, and they're good enough to win the whole thing, and they got to take advantage of it.
Right. We don't have to turn the clock back altogether too far to remember that the Eagles won the Super Bowl 5 years ago. How'd that next season go? Not all that well. They got a double doink win in Chicago, and then see you later. Bye. The season was over and done with. It doesn't guarantee you anything when you have a superior season, and it doesn't get any more superior than winning the Super Bowl, like the Eagles did in 2017. There are no guarantees for the year thereafter. And yes, estimations, your belief on what the Eagles were before the season started may have been one thing. And if that's the case, surely I know very few people who, other than those who wear eagle-colored glasses, predicted a 14-win regular season for the Eagles. But expectations have changed. As John says, this is not a minefield that they got to get through. They just have to take care of their business, and they should be playing in Arizona less than a month from now.
Yeah,
how much pressure is on them because of that, John? Because the expectation changed, because they are 14-3, because they are hosting whatever playoff game they're going to play in the NFC. How much has the pressure ratcheted up? And are they showing that when you're around these guys?
No, I don't. Nick's very good at that. And I trace back to what I said before earlier in the show. He constantly says there's always pressure in the NFL. And then there's always pressure in Philadelphia because of the passion of the market, whether you're 9-8 or 14-3 or 16-1. But they do a very good job of compartmentalizing. They have, we talked all year. Is this a trap game? Is this a trap game? For the most part, they didn't have many trap games. They had some, human nature lulls, I like to call them. They've done a very good job with it as a whole. But I mean, the pressure's always there. The pressure's always there. I mean, let's be honest, Jody. You've been doing this a long time. People lose their minds when you lose one football game in this town. I mean, the pressure's always there. Even with a team as good as this team, how do they? I had a guy that say, "Oh, with this talent, the constant Gannon criticism. With this talent, they should be number one across the board in every category." I mean, when you're that unrealistic, the pressure is always there with this football team. It is built in with this football team, and some people handle it better than others. But you got a core group here of Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni that handle it very well. And then you have the veteran guys who've been through it all, Kelsey and Graham and Cox. They know. And Lane is in that category as well. I mean, they know, and they've been through it, and they understand it. So, some of the younger players may not understand it yet, but luckily you have those sort of pillars to make them aware of it. A.J. Brown's also, he went through it in Tennessee last year to a lesser extent as the number one seed and failing. We were talking to him about that yesterday. He realizes the sense of urgency. So I don't think it's going to be a problem.
All right, I'm going to ask you to look in your football crystal ball. And I know the number one focus should be Eagles win 2 more games, get to a Super Bowl, see who comes out of the AFC. But whether that does or doesn't happen, if they get to the Super Bowl, they win it, lose it, we're going to have football in 2023. Another season's going to come up. How much did the playoffs and the outcome of the games for 2 teams I'm referring to, the Baltimore Ravens and the Philadelphia Eagles, going to affect the quarterback market during this offseason? The Eagles have the ability to do an extension with Jalen Hurts once the season ends. They can't do it before then because he's on his rookie deal. You can't negotiate an extension until you get to the final year of that rookie deal. That will be next year. And the Ravens are already facing that with Lamar Jackson. Jackson's missed a bunch of games. Jalen Hurts missed 2, and we're having this debate as to how they're handling him getting ready for the playoffs. Is he going to be able to play to that MVP level that he did during the regular season? Come the postseason here, you've got probably the 2 most prolific running quarterbacks in the NFL, and they're both playing playoff games or not playing playoff games in Lamar Jackson's case with injury question marks. How much is that going to be a topic? How much of it is it going to affect the negotiations that the Ravens have with Jackson and the Eagles have with Hurts?
I don't think that much for the reason, one other guy who would argue with your 2 most prolific would be Justin Fields. Now, just as a runner, obviously, but, I'll throw him in the category as well because he was injured as well. So there's no doubt that, if you play that style, you're more susceptible to injuries. So, there's no doubt about that. But as far as the thought process with you can't pay guys because of that, I think it's already been sort of self-corrected before this. And the fact that it's more the college product than the pro product driving this and more younger coaches in that's the way they play in college. So that's what's coming. So you can pound the square peg in the round hole if you want to and try to. And by the way, I'll use Fields again. Chicago's doing a disservice to that kid, trying to make him Aaron Rodgers, at least early in the season. You can try to do that, or you can do what the Eagles did and the Ravens have done and build around the strengths of the quarterback you do have. Now, from the contract standpoint, what you're talking about, it's already done, Jody. And we saw it with Carson Wentz. And I fell into this trap as well. I'll raise my hand. Oh, how do you get out of that contract? Well, they got out of it because they structure it. Now you got to take your medicine for 1 year. But you can get out of anything. All these contracts are basically, you're going to hear the big numbers. You're going to hear the 5 to 6 years, the 240 million guaranteed, blah, blah, blah. But the way they structure them, and Howie's better at this than anybody. Normal players, it's 2 years and you're out. You can get out. And it's very easy to get out. Quarterbacks, it's a little bit more difficult, and it might take you to a third year. But if you're the worst GM in the history of the planet, if you can't get out of a contract after 3 years. So if the catastrophe happens, you might have a season here or there where you're really up against it. But they've already figured that out. The Howie Rosemans, the Jake Rosenbergs of the world, they've already figured that out.
But here's the rub, John. And then there was Deshaun Watson. There is no getting out of that contract after a year or 2 years. Every penny guaranteed of $230 million. And without being an insider down in Baltimore and knowing what's going on, that's why the Ravens didn't get the contract done with Lamar Jackson. He wants to be paid like Deshaun Watson and feels he should be paid like Deshaun Watson because he's already won an MVP. Deshaun Watson hasn't. And oh, by the way, he's got no cloud hanging over his head of 75 lawsuits for sexual misconduct. Why can't he ask for Deshaun Watson's
Well,
contract?
he can ask for it, but and people were angry about the Cleveland Browns around the league. They were very angry, and that was the assumption that, and typically, understandably so. Well, Deshaun got this, so the next guy. It hasn't worked out that way. Nobody's going down that path. So,
but nobody hasn't not gotten it either. There's been no big signing since.
But nobody is willing to say, I'm going to give you a complete bully. Now, Kirk Cousins was actually first before. People don't realize that. He got a fully guaranteed, I think it was 3-year deal. It might have been 2 years. They might go that route.
You can get out of that. That's not the same thing.
No,
the fully guaranteed
it
part is, but you can't compare a 2-year deal to a 5-year deal.
Well,
5-year deal just blows up your entire organization. If you a year into it, you go, "Oh shoot, we screwed up. We got to move on from this guy."
I think the assumption is that every team will kowtow to what the Browns do, and there's no evidence that that's happening or it's going to happen. And again, if it does happen, it would be more in the Cousins realm of all right, we'll give you fully guarantees, but it'll be 2 or 3 years. They'll lessen. And I've argued that for years when, one of the most disingenuous arguments you see all the time is NBA versus NFL. When NBA free agency comes and, you have these massive contracts and people say football's more popular. They should be paid more than basketball. Well, basketball teams they used to be 12. Now it's 15 or whatever. You got 53 players plus practice squad, gets you to 69 plus injured reserve, gets you into the 70s. The pie, it's got to be split up. It's just a math equation.
Right.
So it's one of the more disingenuous arguments, but just because Cleveland does it doesn't mean anybody else is doing it. And if they do it, it'll be more Cousins-like and the shorter term, which I've always argued to NFL players. You can get fully guaranteed money, but it's going to be, 1-2 year deals, increments, and then you're back on the free agent market. But because of the injury rate in this league, Cleveland made a dumb decision. And that not even bringing in the sexual assault allegations, not even bringing in the guy hasn't played 2 years. And by the way, he's looked awful because he hasn't played for 2 years. I'm not even talking about the football part of it, just the finances part of it. But they felt like they weren't involved. If they weren't going to do it, he was going to Atlanta or Carolina. So they felt desperate and they went down a route that other teams, and Baltimore's a perfect example, they're not giving them a fully guaranteed deal. They'll give them a great deal, but they'll structure it like they have to structure it.
All right. Well, we'll see if they are willing to go down the route of going year to year. That's not an optimum way of doing it either. And if Lamar Jackson and, sorry to say this, Eagle fans, Jalen Hurts decide to go down that route, that if they don't get the contract they want, your only alternative is to slap a franchise tag on them.
And if you have to go,
please tell me the franchise that's won anything with a quarterback on a franchise tag. It's never happened, John. The NFL is 0 for that. There has never been a team that's won with a quarterback on a franchise tag.
It's never a good situation. You don't want to do that. But I will say that I do not think that anybody is following the path of the Cleveland Browns. I think now you never say never because there's some other dumb organizations, but especially those two organizations, Baltimore and Philadelphia, who have been, very strong at the GM position for years, especially financially. Yeah, I don't think you have to worry about it that much. I really don't.
We should stay on point and worry about the window that is open for a potential Super Bowl trip. But I do think that is an interesting topic that we're going to be talking about plenty here on Birds 365 in the upcoming months. Upcoming next there on Birds 365 is our buddy Bo Wolf from The Athletic. Been a minute since Bo's been good enough to jump on with us. Very much looking forward to talking to him about the Eagles and this postseason journey they're about to get on. Bo Wolf with us.